My name is Chris Endicott. I'm a founder of Eastside. We started in 1994 and I was artistic director until 2017.
I'm Raki Jasani, also co-founder of Eastside and co-director.
Well, the name Eastside comes from our first production, which was a production of Bugsy Malone. The musical was set on the Lower East Side of New York. And on stage, in one of the scenes where we had down by the dock, there were crates with Eastside stenciled on the crates. And we thought when we wanted a name, Eastside, and we took the stencil. That's what is the inspiration for the logo. So, that's where the name comes from.
And of course, we never imagined it would last for so long. It was a 6-week project, so it was witty and clever to have a name that was linked to the project we were doing. So Eastside Productions, that was the first name we had, and there was this little link to the East End of London. So the Lower East Side of New York, the East End of London, that all made perfect sense at the time. Because we didn't think it would last beyond 6 weeks. And here we are. It's been a long 6 weeks. 6 weeks is 30 years.
Later, yeah. We worked with a team at the time, some of the people I was at drama school with and some people that we knew. So everyone who was working with the young people was, professionally trained. And the whole thing was done, as professionally as possible. So that was our sort of, the thing that we liked to do from the start was put in as much as we could and then a little bit extra, just so, the kids had a really good time taking part.
My name is Matt Lane and I'm the Chief Executive Officer and Artistic Director of Eastside. Well, amazingly, back in the 90s, there was, I was at Bristol, I was at Bristol University and I was a medical student, and there was a program called The Big Breakfast. And my first encounter with Eastside was actually through watching an episode of The Big Breakfast, and they mentioned the production of Bugsy Malone. And I distinctly remember that as a student, because it kind of got to me. There was something that they were doing that I was really interested in, but I was over there doing medicine, if you see what I mean. So actually it struck a really sort of strange resonance there. And then of course I didn't even come back to Eastside for decades later. So it's amazing how things can sort of plant in your memory, and then you suddenly remember, I remember seeing these guys. They were on The Big Breakfast. They were promoting this production of Bugsy Malone that we were doing with young people from across London. It really resonated with me, but obviously I didn't get a chance to pursue it until a bit later.
We did talk and say it would be nice to do another project sometime soon, but then Chris started to get calls from schools saying, "Oh, what did you do? Can you come in?" And I think the first few times Chris said no, and then he said, "Oh, well, maybe." And so we started to dip our toe in, and thought, well, and going into schools was a new thing because we'd done a summer program. We thought, we'll do a summer program. We'll do a series of week-long workshops across London that we called from page to stage, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see if there's any interest or support for it, and we'll just give it a go.
This was 1994. Arts education was a bit different then. People weren't going into schools. Things like this weren't really happening. So the projects that came after Bugsy were when we went into schools to work with young people. I think they had readers in residence and things like that would come in and just sort of read to children. But actually the idea of bringing creative professional artists of all the different art forms into schools to work directly with the young people was new.
And believing that the young people could be creative, because, you'd have people come in and perform at the young people, but actually saying to the young people, you can perform, you can dance, you can write, you can do all these things, rather than here's someone that we've kind of parachuted in that will do something at you. This was about doing something with the young people as well. And that was, It didn't exist much in 1994.
I'm Sarah Parslow. I am an art and photography teacher. I currently teach at Caterham High School out in the Sticks in Surrey. And I worked for Eastside over 20 years ago, which makes me feel really old. And I was a practitioner and a facilitator. So I did loads and loads of different projects. So I started off doing half art projects and half drama projects, and then sometimes I combine the two. So like one project we did shadow puppet theatre. So the kids made and designed all the shadow puppets, and then we put on like a little performance as well. So we kind of combined the two. That was really fun. That was one of my first ones. One of my faves that really stood out, I did this Japanese kite project. And for me, I had to I really went to uncover all the whole history of Japanese kites, did a load of research, found all my imagery, went to different museums. I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this. Turned up, and then one of the kids was Japanese, and his dad came along, and he literally had all this inside knowledge. And then he became like a second expert in there. And by the end, honestly, these Japanese kites were something else.
Well, the way we expanded was we took on one extra art form at a time. So I think the first summer was theatre, and then we added literature.
Well, I think film and digital was the last.
Because we didn't really understand that to start with.
Except we were intrigued by it.
Yeah.
So we did it, and we did it well, eventually.
Yeah, and in 2000 we were commissioned by Westminster Council to do a thing at the Millennium Dome.
Our Town
Our
Story.
Town Story,
Because
and
every council in the country had a slot to tell their
one
town
day,
story.
One day in the Dome.
Yeah.
And for that, we had a big digital project. So we filmed 24 hours in Westminster. So we filmed from sunrise to sunset, different places, different events. And then we edited it all together and projected it on a screen, and the kids acted out in front
Sort of
what
physical
was
theatre.
going on in the background.
And it was really cool because we went into the House of Commons, and so then we had like the kids performing, fake debates. It was all really physical theatre and dance.
They didn't say a word.
And we had
performing.
music specially
So
composed.
that was
for that.
our first sort of digital
Well,
experiment.
actually, that was quite nice because the person that composed the music, especially for that, was also the person who'd been the musical director on Bugsy. So we sort of brought him back. But yeah, that was a really fun project, and I think kind of slightly ahead of our time. We didn't really. I mean, now you see that happening a lot, but it wasn't happening that widely in 2000.
Well, our first office was above the Green Room Actors Club, which was a club for actors on the Strand. And we were there for a while, and then the Actors Club changed hands, and so we had to move from there. And somebody knew somebody who owned a ship, or ran a ship, that was permanently moored on the Thames. And they said, why don't you have your office there? So it seemed like a crazy idea, but I went along, and they showed us the ship. And, there were all these lovely cabins with, oak panelling and portholes looking out onto the Thames. And he said, I'll give you an office here. You could just get involved in some of the youth projects that happen on the ship, and you can be here rent-free. So I thought, amazing. So we turned up the next week when we were due to move in, and we went past all of those offices down into the bowels of the ship that hadn't been shown before. And he opened this sort of storeroom, which was floor to ceiling full of junk furniture. And he said, if you can empty this space, you can have this space. It didn't have panelling, it didn't have portholes. And we had to carry broken tables and chairs up little spiral staircases on a ship and clear all the space. But he was true to his word, and we had that office for over 3 years, rent-free, on the Thames. We billed ourselves as London's only underwater theatre company.
I'm Catherine Pender. I'm the Grants Director at John Lyons Charity, and I first came across Eastside in 2000. John Lyons Charity is a grant-giving trust. It awards grants to registered charities who apply for projects that will benefit children and young people who must be resident in 9 North West London boroughs. I think what was interesting about Eastside and the reason why they stood out for us at the very beginning and why we were prepared to look at them at the very beginning was they had even then a very clear message about what it was that they wanted to achieve with their funding. Obviously, over the years, that vision has grown, but they were also honing their craft. And I think there were things about them that resonated for us as a relatively new organisation as well. But the ambition and the commitment to only doing something that's really good quality. You know, you might not pull that off immediately, but you will get good at it, and you can't ever take your eye off that bit. That's the bit that counts. I think it's really important to look back at a foundation's heritage, understand where it came from, and understand what that direction of travel has looked like, because very often knowing where you are going, even if you don't know how you're going to get there, is the bit that really matters, because you need to respond to how you're going to get there, because it depends on the people you work with en route. So when you have a lot of success, you can hold on to that success, because actually everything else that goes around it is usually really hard. It's much harder than many other sectors. It's much harder than just thinking where you want to go and how you're going to get there, because other people have to believe in you, and it's hard to persuade people to believe in you because there's a price tag attached to it. Justify yourself when you're in the voluntary sector to start with. So this heritage that you need to really hold on to, often you are trying to hold on to it, you are trying to keep it going, you're trying to push that momentum, you're trying to keep the success of it really front and centre of everybody's real vision for what they themselves consider to be an important thing, to be something that they think is successful. And sometimes that doesn't match you, so you're pushing that rock up the hill. But when it comes down the other side, it does gather an awful lot of moss. It goes on its own, because good things are just good things.
I think the kids just really enjoyed having someone from outside, and then I always brought loads of really different sort of materials that they wouldn't have ordinarily been using, whether we did like a textiles thing, or maybe I'd bring spray paints or something that I knew they wouldn't have in the classroom, so that, you know, it was a bit more interesting, and the outcomes were fab. But it was, for me personally, that was very exciting actually, because it's the first time I'd ever done anything that structured. And also, I was working mainly in secondary school, whereas the after-school clubs were mostly like primaries. So for me, suddenly I was like, oh, it's the big kids, okay. I was a little bit intimidated, but it was just as good and just as fun. And that, for me, was like the light bulb moment of when I realised that actually I could be a teacher, I could do this, I could totally, I was because I spent so much time with the teachers on those projects, that it really, that was like my stepping stone into my future.
In terms of reaching out and contacting people to come and join this 30th anniversary experience, where we're bringing people together, we're talking to them, we're finding out about their journeys, we're beginning to learn a huge amount. And what occurs to me is that there's so many different touch points to this organisation. So you'd think you just need to start off and just look through all the projects and try and get the young people who are involved in the project. So, I mean, that's really key. You know, some of them not so young anymore, but they would have gone on into adulthood and done all sorts of different things with their lives. But then you also think about, what about all those artists that we've managed to employ and kept them working in the sector and those kind of things? They've got a story to tell. What about the people who've kept the organisation safe and kept its governance strong and made sure that we still were able to pay everybody their wages and all that kind of stuff? What about the people with the vision for the projects? What about the partners who've invested in us? What about the Disneys, the Adobes, the BAFTAs, the BFIs, all of those kind of people who've been involved over the years? So you start to think about this as a community you are part of and that you're working with, and it's not about individuals, but it's about sustaining and hopefully growing a community of effort that has a particular interest at heart. So that's what I'm kind of learning, is this is more than just, you know, he said that, she said that, they said that. This is actually about kind of the evolution of a set of ideas. It's like a river that grows, you know, more and more people kind of get on board and swept along with it. So that's what I'm learning, really.